All right, welcome into Carp's Corner. Another great edition here as we get closer to the Christmas holiday coming up here this weekend. So, got some bowl games to break down. Got some NFL games that we got to talk about from last weekend because there's a lot of big news going on and happening in the NFL and really all the major sports and how they're handling COVID and this new wave of positive tests that are coming in and what that really means, how that's impacting the players that are going to be performing in the games that are going to be out there. Because NFL had some really strong words at the beginning of the season of how they're going to operate. And you have to begin to wonder, was that a lot of posturing just to try to get everybody vaccinated? Because they appear to have kind of rolled some things back. And then, the ultimate irony in life of the Nets calling Kyrie Irving and saying, hey, can you come bail us out? Can you come save us? We've got like 5 guys, 6, 7 guys that are eligible to play. Then Kyrie comes back and he promptly tests positive. But, given the rash of players out, how they're going to ultimately need him, as well at points this season. So they appear now not to be too proud and get down on one knee and come crawling back. The same way the NFL is trying to make sure they get this thing right and, change things from, testing regularly to now we're not testing players, all the guys. It's just kind of random stuff, asymptomatic, maybe not quite as much. They've blurred the lines of everything that was supposed to happen. So we'll get into that. Aaron Rodgers' historic weekend, monumental weekend, and to put in perspective just how good he is. And he's the guy who I played against a number of times. I would say when he was younger and more sprightly and more youthful and maybe better, but you can't argue with what he's doing right now and how well he's playing. So push all that to the side. We'll get to that. Some transfers in college football and some things that are happening. And some of these coaches coming out here and they sound a little bit like, hey, they want to take their ball and go home and they're not happy about it. But, the reality is, the transfer portal has done some good things, but there have also been some unintended consequences that we'll kind of dive into as well. Heck, we've got bowl games, we've got playoffs coming up, and football, there are going to be fans. How does that look? Could there still be fans in the stands, or could there be something else that happens? John Harbaugh loves to go for 2. Brandon Staley, the Chargers head coach, loves to go for it on 4th down. So dive into a little bit of that. Some other NFL news about guys returning to play and how that ultimately is going to look. And then one of my favorites, Dan Campbell, and some of the comments that he ultimately said and had after a game, and just really how his team is playing for him as they got their second win and look to say, hey, let's see if we can go wrap it up and finish the season strong and win 3 or 4 more football. Well, I guess they have 3 more football games left as the NFL is rounding here with 3 games really left to play for the majority of the teams and see if they can make the playoff push. I wanted to start here, college football. And Bo Nix, Auburn legacy, really a starting quarterback for 3 years. Had some good, had some bad, highly recruited guy. Decides to get in the transfer portal. Going to leave the place where he is a legacy. His father played there, leaving Auburn. And, the question is, Ryan Harsin, their coach, does he still want him there at Auburn? He came from Boise, came in. This wasn't a guy that he had recruited, he had developed. So you wonder, the conversation came to play out where, hey, Bo, we like you, but we're going to bring in some other guys. Maybe there'll be some more competition this year. And maybe he didn't like that. And that gets into kind of the deeper root here of, college football and the transfer portal and what that does. But he hops in and he slides out of the transfer portal. Bo Nix, that is, going to Oregon. His old offensive coordinator, Kenny Dillingham from Auburn, is now the OC up there. And Dan Lanning, who was the former defensive coordinator of Georgia, he's the head coach. And you think, okay, maybe you'll head up here. They guarantee him a job, whatever it is, but he's reconnected with someone he feels good about. But this was a kid who was, supposed to be the answer for the Auburn Tigers. And he played really well at times, did some really good things. However, it always felt like unfulfilled expectations. But with that, like leaving, now going into your final year, when you're at a place that you're a legacy. Your dad played there. You were supposed to be the guy that was supposed to restore Auburn to their glory and challenge Bama and do all those things. And it just really hasn't worked out. And I would like to have seen it, how that final year plays out. Maybe it was a little on Bo Nix not wanting to be there anymore, the pressure of everything. Maybe it was, a lot of it may have been on the coaching. Brian Harsin saying, hey, we're not guaranteeing you anything. Maybe we're even going to move on and you might not be the starter or have to at least compete come spring. I mean, it wasn't supposed to work out that way for Bo Nix. And this is one thing I think with the ease of the transferring, if you can transfer and not sit out, like, do you really try to experience the growth that you're trying to have? And I know I sound like an old guy, get off my lawn, shake your fist at the sky, but it's just tough to see that because I feel like his story was supposed to all be with the Auburn Tigers. And it probably could have been, and maybe should have been if it wasn't for him transferring. Another big quarterback hopping in the transfer portal, Max Johnson, starting quarterback last year for LSU, father Brad Johnson. He has a younger brother who is terrific as well, great tight end. They're going to be going now as a package deal to A&M. A&M finished, with a really high up in the recruiting rankings, 1 or 2, depending on where you look at it. Jimbo Fisher made comments about the NIL and how some places have been doing this for a long time. We hadn't, of course, we hadn't at A&M or wherever he has been, but there were other places, and now it's just kind of all above board. But Max Johnson jumping out of the portal there, and he is in addition to that recruiting class that they put together. And so you have to ask yourself, is Jimbo building a monster there at A&M? What are they going to ultimately look like? This year they struggled at points in time, and they did beat Alabama. Their quarterback play wasn't terrific. You're playing some young guys, but their passing game wasn't up to snuff. And so now they're bringing Max Johnson in, and other highly recruited quarterbacks. They're going to have an interesting room this year to see what that ultimately looks like in College Station and whether they can challenge maybe next year in the SEC West. So Max Johnson, who beat A&M while at LSU, is now going to be joining A&M and leaving LSU. And I understand that Brian Kelly's coming in and that's not the guy he committed to. And so you want to move on, but it just, these things happen early. They happen quickly, sometimes in careers. And without, like I said, shaking my fist at the sky, you wonder like how maybe it would going to be, how everything could have maybe changed and what could have happened through that coaching transition and whether or not it would have been something that would have been worth it. And it begs the question now, as I was talking to some of these coaches in college football and talking to people who I know who work at different media sites from around the college landscaping, everybody wants to rate these recruiting classes. And you dive in here and say, this many 5 stars, this many 4 stars, this many total signings. Here's your composite scores. Here's your individual average player score of what you're getting. If your class is a little smaller, everybody leans on different things. But the one thing that doesn't comprise anymore, is transfers. And it's like grading the draft for NFL teams. That's just part of it. Now in college football, the other element is essentially the free agent signing period, bringing in NFL or college free agents, which is essentially what the transfer portal does. You're going out there and shopping, and those guys, that if they come in, they're not encapsulated in that rating. Like, you're only talking about recruited players from high school or maybe JUCOs. Now, the question is, do you have to have a whole new rating system for transfers? You have your transfer grade, your commitment grade out of high school, and how does that ultimately look when those guys come in? Or do you kind of blend them together and say, hey, here's our class, here's a little bit of transfer action, here's some of the high school players, and how does that all ultimately look and shake out? It's a new industry. It's things that's just kind of starting to pick up steam. I guarantee you that will happen here in the coming years because, there's classes, there's coaches now that are going to probably sign 12 to 15 guys, maybe 10 guys from high school, and they're going to build a lot of their program through the transfer portal. And so there has to be a way to come out and rank that and to quantify that and to see what ultimately that means. Mike Leach, his comments on it, hey, it's like guys, they take their ball, they go home, jump in the transfer portal, and they can't get coached hard. You hear Dabo Sweeney lamenting a little bit of it too. And that is one of the true problems with the transfer portal is the fact that can you really coach players as hard as you used to be able to? And I don't know if you can. You have to recruit the right guys. And you're going to see a lot of people and a lot of players that jump in the portal and then jump in the portal again. And heck, probably jump in 3 times because they're trying to figure it out. And I always liken like this to someone who's been divorced a bunch. And I'm not going to sit here and throw shade on it. Or someone who has a bunch of relationships, but they can't ever really seem to lock it down. I don't care if you're a man, if you're a woman, it doesn't matter. But there's always the problem with someone else. It's never their problem. And so the portal gives you the opportunity to go somewhere, just like in a relationship, find someone else. Greener pastures. Grass isn't always greener other places. And eventually, when you're that person who's been in a lot of these relationships, you have to begin to ask yourself, was the problem someone else? Was it my coaches? Was it the school? Was it the opportunity? Or was the problem ultimately me? And that's something that I think we're not impressing enough responsibility and onus of decisions onto young people. We want to try to absolve them from all this. And in doing that, you're handicapping them for the future. That's ultimately what's going on. And that's a little disappointing to hear. It's disheartening to think about. But I'm curious to see kind of how this moves. Because for me, my solution to transfer portal, and I'll beat this into the ground, I think you should have to spend 2 years at a school, unless your coach leaves, 2 years there, and then you can move. After your second season, hey, things aren't working out. Maybe they're recruiting around you. Maybe the coach left. Maybe your position coach left. Maybe you just don't really like the scheme. You're homesick, whatever it is. But when that happens, ultimately it's a better spot because you've experienced it. You've gone through it. You know what you're looking for. And now you can make an informed move on where you want to transfer and where you want to go. Because if you're just doing it after one season, well, this coach really liked me when I was here. He was nice to me. Well, every coach during recruiting is going to be nice. It's their job. They're trying to get you there. And so you probably just remember that. And you never think that they would be someone who will coach you as hard as your current coach is. And I hope the coaches continue to do that because we've seen a little oscillation trying to figure this out. Do you coach these guys just as hard as you used to? Or if you don't, are you cheating them? And do you really even want them there if they can't handle that? If you're trying to make them better and they're ultimately not down for improving. A little bit of NIL stuff here, because this kind of goes part and parcel with the college transfer portal. You can slide in, hop in that transfer portal. They'll have an NIL deal waiting for you on the other side. And I was beginning to think about this, and you see some things and people ask questions on social media and on Twitter. And hey, the problem everyone says with the NIL is right now it's the Wild West because you have different rules in Georgia, Texas, Florida, California, Ohio, Michigan, everybody else, every state, basically legislature put through their own rules and their own spin on things. And, even in the state of Georgia where they can hold a certain percentage back and distribute it to all the athletes. And I mean, these are laws. These are laws that happen. In some states, you can't do this. Other states, you can do that. And so, there becomes this asymmetry here in recruiting and asymmetry as far as, what you're going to be able to provide players. And is that going to create a imbalance? If you see what's going on right now in Texas and all the stuff down there, like, does everyone want to see the best athletes flocking or staying there because maybe they have better laws? And this is without diving in and digging into all the details because the devil's always there when it comes to these laws that have been passed that the universities ultimately have to follow. But then the question was raised to me, who's going to enforce these laws on the state level? Typically it'd be the attorney general. I think if you have some sort of state law, that you have an institution who maybe isn't fully abiding by or following to the letter of the law as it was described, and it was, legislated. So there would be the ones who would bring these charges and try to get this thing figured out. The question was, what attorney general in any state that cared remotely about athletics is going, because a lot of these guys in state, they're publicly elected officials, who is going to have the stones to go there and file a lawsuit against Georgia or Texas A&M or Florida State or Bama or Auburn or Ohio State or whoever it might be? Because you know what? Your school isn't fully abiding by the rules of which we laid out with our state legislature. You're doing things that are trying to win, and we want to try to hold you back Because in some of these states, the ones that I just mentioned, college football is really, really important. And it's the one thing, like athletics, they're getting to be a little bit divisive, but it's still always been the one thing that has united us. And whether or not you're, a Democrat or Republican, liberal, conservative, red state, blue state, when you walk into that stadium, the only colors that matter are the colors of your team. And so if the attorney general says, hey, you're not doing this right, you're breaking the rules to your advantage to try to procure talent, what AG is going to step up and say, you know what, we should probably look into this and we should be the ones that are the whistleblowers? Heck no, that's not going to happen. Not in most states anyway. And if they do, they might be writing their death sentence if you're the attorney general in that state. Because I don't care if you're the attorney general in the state of Alabama and you lean on something that Auburn is doing, and maybe Alabama, they're not doing it, they're not getting away with it or whatever it is, you're still dividing the state. And really nobody wants to see that done because they're going to be afraid that they're going to go to your school next. So I don't know, even if they break some of these laws that have been put into place, because they're just not rules now. These are laws for the individual state. Who is going to be there to enforce them? Because for my money, the attorney general or the governors or whoever has the ability to push this forward legally would never even dream of touching it. Just doesn't make sense. It's not good politics and it's not good business with that. So moving on from college, on to some NFL news now. We'll get with some of the good, the bad, little bit of the ugly as we break down a little bit of urban stuff and what's going on there. And, my thoughts kind of wrapping up is his firing. But first, some good news. Aaron Rodgers, 442 career touchdown passes. Could he catch Tom Brady one day? Well, we'll see if he can stay healthy for another 3 or 4 years and what pace that puts him at. Heck, he'd probably need to stay healthy for 5 or 6. He's sitting there. Tom Brady's over 600 now, and he's sitting around 450. But 442 ties Brett Favre, Hall of Fame quarterback, I believe 3-time MVP. I think Aaron's winning the MVP this year too, by the way. With what he's done, how good he's looked. You go watch him play against the Ravens, the ball coming out of his hands so quickly against free rushers, so accurate. But he throws 442 touchdown passes, tying Brett Favre, 93 interceptions. As you sit here and you wonder how many picks Brett Favre threw, like, how many is Brett Favre threw 3 times as many? He threw 288 to Aaron's 93 with the same number of touchdowns, just to give you some perspective on how good he is. And I remember a couple years ago, Aaron's struggling. People are saying he's washed. Dude, this guy's arm is as elite as it's ever been. His release is as elite as it's ever been. And now that he has the broken toe, his ability to drive and to move around the pocket, he'll still run and he can still show you that athleticism. I guarantee it hurts you. It puts him in pain, but he can't drive the football. So it's all on his arm and his ability to sit there, diagnose the defense, get through his reads, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and just snap the ball out of there and put it on the money. The guy does not miss. So we sit here and talk about Pat Mahomes and everything. He goes on. He's missing on a 4th down throw and calling it bad. And Aaron's missed on throws too. Don't get me wrong. But man, the guy is as consistent as you will find. And he also has that high level, elite accuracy. And it's not just the arm strength. It is the quickness of his release and the speed of his mind to process. And he's got the beard going now, the long hair. He's looking like Kenny Stabler from back in the day. And man, Aaron Rodgers, he is my pick for MVP. I believe he's the oldest MVP in the NFL and maybe in all of the 4 major sports with what he's putting together. He is playing some darn good football because he is playing at an elite level that, you know what, very few people have seen. Very, very few people have seen, especially at this age in their career. It's really Tom Brady is the other guy that you can kind of look at. Some other NFL news, like I was saying, we're looking at teams that one-score games because the NFL has been tight as hell this year on some of these games and the scoring and how close they've been. And the most one-score wins, meaning within a touchdown, which you're going to find, Steelers have 7, Ravens have 6, Falcons have 6. Steelers are 7-2-1 in those games. Ravens are 6-4. Falcons surprisingly 6-2. And everybody's going to get on John Harbaugh. They could be 8-2 if they would have found a way to win. But he's gone for 2 against Green Bay this weekend and the Steelers before. And everybody is banging on him. And he starts talking analytics, all this stuff when he goes for 2 and the different things he does and the science and the numbers of going for it on 4th down. He comes out and says, hey, a lot of it's in my gut. It's in my gut, man. I felt like we had a chance to go for it there. And I understand when you got Brett Hundley, you got your backup quarterback in there, and he's the guy who, is in there instead of Lamar Jackson, your MVP, and you feel like you have a chance to win it in regulation, go for it, man. You're always going to tick half the people off. And if you make the conservative play and you lose, you don't get near the criticism. But I respect John Harbaugh. I respect the hell out of him for him going out there and doing this. And a lot of people don't like it. I do. And everyone wants to play results. We lost both the games. You can't play results. Just like you can't with Staley and the Chargers, who went for a bazillion 4th downs against the Chiefs. And be like, well, if you would have just kicked the field goal instead of doing that, you have no idea how the game is going to play out. But if you go by the numbers and you know what your offense is, you can't play results of not getting it. Because over the large sample size, things will play out. And they'll play out to your favor. Now, you maybe lose a game or 2 because of it, but ultimately, hopefully you'll win more down the line if you keep operating like this. And so I've never been just a pure analytics guy, but there are guys, Bill Belichick goes for it a lot. And he laughs about analytics. He uses them in his mind, but just doesn't probably talk about it. And he laughs and jokes and makes funny lines about it in his press conferences. But the best coaches, man, they're aggressive. They go for wins. They understand when not to. And so maybe, discretion's the better part of valor at some points. But I love that these coaches have told their players what they're about, what to expect, and how to go get it and what we're going to do. And so that's big. That is big time ball when you can say that and you tell your players you're going to play a certain way, and then you ultimately follow it up, because so few coaches have the stones to do that. When you put it against them and their job might be on the line, wins and losses, then all of a sudden you really see that, you know what, maybe not quite as aggressive as I told our players we were ultimately going to be. With talking about coaches who are loved, Dan Campbell, Lions, I believe they're 2-11-1 this year, if I'm not mistaken. Just got their 2nd win. They beat up the Arizona Cardinals pretty good. Cardinals were the top seed in the NFC until this weekend. Green Bay just usurped them. And a lot of that went to the fact that they were double-digit favorites against the Detroit Lions. Dan Campbell's players are still playing for him. And this, I'm going to juxtapose this with Urban. Dan Campbell is a no-nonsense guy, comes in. People made fun of him at his press conference for the biting of the kneecaps. Their roster isn't great. They've been ravaged with injuries, and they've traded away some players. They know that they're really not playing for the playoffs this year. They're playing to improve and to build culture and to build a team. And to be, whatever it is, 2-11-1, what is that, 14 games into the season, and to have your team still play like that and have that belief, and you can see him when he speaks after the game and how his players respond to him. He has that locker room. Those guys would do anything for this guy. And even when they're losing, they're still trusting the process, which is hard because you need results eventually. But his team, the Detroit Lions, found a way to beat one of the best teams in the NFL. And I know the Cards are struggling a little bit, but they should have won that game. They have better talent. But Dan Campbell got his team ready to play. They believed in him. I wouldn't be surprised if they knock off another team or 2 in their last 3 games. There's a belief, there's a commitment about them, and you can hear it in their players' voices and how passionate they are about going and getting this thing. And so you juxtapose that to Urban. He ultimately gets fired by Shad Khan for cause. We'll see about that. I truly believe they'll come to some sort of settlement, because I don't know if he'd be able to hold up fully in court, firing him with cause once you get the legal side of it and everything that happened. But there was the Doyle hiring, the Tebow signing. You've got the comments about the vaccination and playing into roster cuts, the incident not flying back from Cincinnati and what was seen and videotaped, at a bar in Columbus, Ohio, and then ultimately you could call it the coup de grace, the Josh Lambeau, him coming out and saying he was kicked by Urban, while stretching, and irony is he's the kicker. And the words that he even used to describe the specialists and everything. We live in a world now where, you can't say anything controversial. Well, the NFL, like, first of all, people will say that's an assault in the workplace violence. I don't know if you've ever watched the NFL. There's about 80,000 assaults that are going on the football field every single Sunday. They go on in practice. It's a violent sport by nature. Kicking a grown man with the side of your foot when he's stretching. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and dive into that and act like I'm ultra offended by it. If it happened, it happened. If Josh Lambo really had a problem, you stand up and you address him right there in front of the whole team and everybody else. If they thought it was egregious, we'll have your back. But as you watched Jacksonville, they were playing hard and relatively hard, but I didn't feel like they were playing for him. And I didn't feel like there was definitely that alignment with the coaching staff, which is why you felt that disjointed and disconnectedness when you heard him talk and all these things are leaking out. You're not seeing that in Detroit. And these two situations are fairly similar. And I would even say in Jacksonville, it's a little better because you feel like you have your franchise guy. They swapped and brought in Jared Goff, and I don't think anybody was sitting here writing home saying, we've got our dude. He's played okay this year. But when you have Trevor Lawrence in Jacksonville, you feel like the future is now and it is out there in front of you. But there just wasn't that alignment from the head coach to the coordinators to the assistants, position coaches, and then all the way down to the players. And you could see it and you could feel it when you watched it. And I think a lot of that first early disjointedness and disconnection came from those, the inability for Urban probably connecting with his staff. And because of that, that message then was ultimately not relayed all the way down the chain. So that's where those issues come. And that's when you see teams fall apart and implode from the inside. That's ultimately how it happens and why it happens as well. Lastly, to wrap this up, with the NFL and what's going on, their COVID stuff, it's a mess right now. Came out before the season, said they're not going to postpone any games, but that's not going to happen. They're going to play them regardless. Then all of a sudden you have Raiders and Browns move from Saturday to Thursday. Seattle and the Rams are moved to Tuesday. Washington and the Eagles, they're moved to Tuesday. You know why? Why is this? Because the NFL is all about brand procurement, and they don't want to be putting bad ball out there. No one wants to see third string quarterbacks. And you're probably going to see that a little bit anyway, with Cleveland, but nobody wants to see, you want to see the stars. That's what the television partners are putting out there. The NFL fines guys $5,000 for not having the right ratio of team colors on their sock, white to whatever the color is. And so you think they want to put bad programming on TV with their name tied to it? Heck no, they don't. Not a chance in hell that that's going to happen. And that's something that they ultimately want to do. So crazy town to think this. And they made that statement early on. And I think that was just simply to try to put the heat on all the players to get vaccinated. And now they're changing their protocols. They talk about player safety. There have been 0 hospitalizations, for COVID over the last year and a half. And last year, there wasn't even a vaccine. And so everybody was unvaccinated. These players are some of the guys who have the best, well-conditioned, most well-conditioned athletes and human beings you're going to find. They're in a super healthy demographic, and they have access to the best medical care in the world. Cost is not an issue. They have monitoring all the time. They have access to doctors 24 hours a day. They're not like you and I, schleps going in, sitting in an ER or calling your urgent care or any of that stuff. They're getting the team doc on the phone. If anything's happening, they get right in the hospital. They don't wait 3 weeks for MRIs. They get that stuff immediately right after. And so I laugh about, the calls for player safety and everything. Over the last 2 years, there's been no super spreader events in games. Stuff has happened at facilities, but nothing's happened during games. And so we talk about the player safety element of guys going out there and playing. It's funny to see them now pivot and change, because it was all about safety and making sure things were done right and the appearance and the guys. Now it's, hey, it's the holiday season. People are sitting at home. We need our product out there. They're ready, willing, and able to consume it. And we need to make sure that they have the ability to do so. So we need to feed this stuff to them right away. And so that's where the NFL is. We'll see if the NBA, if the NHL, if they begin to pivot and start to do some of the same things the NFL has done, because they're king right now. and they want to become bigger and better and to make sure they're getting more eyeballs. They added the 17th game. We're starting to see some bad ball right now, and they know they've got to get players back onto the field. And I lied. One more thing. So I want to get to this too with Bruce Arians. Because speaking of COVID, we've got Antonio Brown who got a fake vaccine card that he was working with all year round. He was injured. He was out. He had to sit out a handful of games. And with COVID popping up and spiking up right now, Bruce Arians was asked about the perception of him coming back and playing. Bruce Arians quote, I'll church it up. I could give a crap, didn't say crap, about what they think, people on the outside. The only thing I care about is what's best for this team. And with Chris Godwin blowing out his knee and them getting shut out by the Saints 9-0 in a gross, disgusting offensive performance, Tom Brady slamming down his tablets in disgust during the game about what he's seeing and probably his performance and his team's performance in general. He wants AB back. BA knows they need AB back to win. If they're going to try to make a run at repeating, AB's back. Winning is the only thing that ultimately matters to these NFL teams. They'll tell you a bunch of other stuff, but winning is very important, and it's the most important thing. So that concludes this edition of Carp's Corner. Next, we will dive in, break down the college football playoff, everything that's coming up with that, get you prepared and ready, and it's going to be the Christmas holiday. So who isn't excited about that? But thanks for listening to this edition, Carp's Corner. Talk to you soon.